Yep. So you need
Okay.
to capture the content. That's their.
Yeah.
All right.
Okay.
All right. If y'all are ready to go, in
Yeah.
3, 2, 1.
Welcome to the Mystical Underground. Thank you for joining us. This is Rob McGregor
And Trish McGregor.
and our tech magician producer, John Posey. You can go to themysticalunderground.com, where we make regular posts and where you can find out about our books. Our most recent nonfiction book is The Shift, Reports from the Mystical Underground. Trisha's latest novel is White Crows, and Rob's audio edition of Indiana Jones and the Staff of Kings is now available free of charge on SoundCloud at the Mystical Underground site.
Okay, our guest today is Andrew Macpherson, a world-renowned photographer working in Hollywood. His first book, 2 Million Miles, was published in 2006, and it showcased his photographs working with top fashion magazines such as Vogue and Bazaar, as well as many of the icons of the entertainment industry. His work has regularly appeared on album and magazine covers and movie posters. It can also be seen on his Instagram feed at Andrew Macpherson _official, and on his 2 websites, McFly for the day job, and his personal work is on www.andrewmacpherson.com. Andrew was born in England. He dedicated himself to photography the year his mother died, when he was 13. He surprised his father by telling him that she was going to die when his fairy came to tell him the news at school. His experience with spirit came again when at 18, he spontaneously channeled the spirit of his deceased godfather at the gathering after his funeral. After that, there was a long gap of quiet until he reached 26. Then a floodgate of experiences and dreams opened his eyes to the mystery that contains all that is known. Following that, he kept encountering other people whose lives had been changed or influenced by spirit, and that, combined with his ongoing experiences, inspired him to write A Question of Spirit. Welcome, Andrew.
Welcome, Andrew. Yeah, why don't we start right when you're in your mid-20s? We're just starting to talk about that.
So tell us about being 26.
Yes, so I mean, it's funny, it follows on from what Jude was talking about in her interview. And I literally, one of the first things that happened was I had a dream about the nature of time. And in that dream, the nature of time was shown to me as kind of bundled, coiled, like coils of snakes all bundled up. And I was one of those dreams, you know, when you wake up and you're like, my God, that was so loud and so crisp. And I didn't really understand what it meant. Well, then in the following days, I started having dreams about literally things that happened in the following days. And I had seen them the night before or 2 nights before in my dream exactly as they happened. So it really started kind of throwing me off. I'm like, how can time be a linear unfolding if it's possible to see things which haven't yet happened?
Precognition.
So, yes. And that was kind of a real beginning for me. And then you know, spirit really arrived in my life when I was 29, when a spirit, which I wrote about in Question of Spirit. It's kind of the lead chapter to Question of Spirit. It's essentially a book of interviews because I wanted to make sense of my experiences. So I went out and tried to find as many people as I could who'd had experiences with spirit to try and make sense of it. Spoiler alert, I never did. The mystery is greater than the known, and everything that exists is contained within the mystery. So I actually never got to the end of the rabbit hole, but the learning has been extraordinary and humbling.
It's a continuing quest.
It really is. I mean, you know, even if we look at the universe, we don't know what it's contained within. We don't know what was here before the Big Bang. You know, we literally exist within mystery. And then, you know, I mean, it's funny, following on from Jude's podcast,
The Big Breath.
I really enjoyed. But, you know, everything is built on nothing or on no thing.
Yeah, I like her, the way she said it wasn't the Big Bang, it was the Big Breath.
Yes.
That's how she called
I thought that was great.
Andrew, I love your definition of human life as being the spirit's way of communicating or interacting with matter. That's similar to what has become something of a slogan in the metaphysical world. That is, we are not humans seeking a spiritual experience, but rather spirits experiencing a human experience. But let's turn it around, going the other way. What's your definition of death?
Well, I've had so much experience now with spirits of those who have passed over, that to me it's just creation and destruction, whether everything in this dimension is a duality, whether, of course, electricity or magnetism, but also creation, destruction, good and evil. And we come into this physical being as spirit entering a life, and each life is like a wave. We are all essentially surfers. Each life is a pulse of energy, and we are surfers in this dimension of energy and time. So we come in, we do this dance where we get to experience birth, growth, and then eventually death. This is our wave to ride. And my current feeling about it, because I would never claim to have knowledge, my current feeling is the reason to be here is to celebrate creation, to see what it is, to experience it, and to celebrate it. And I don't really hold with those who say that, it's about suffering or it's about all of this.
Right.
Have to find the beauty and the joy. To me, I've worked obviously a lot with musicians, and there's such magic in music. Music is held within time, whereas what I've done, photography, is taking moments out of time, but music is held within time. But you go back to the campfires of the ancients, and the music is the moment when the tribe is the most united, and it's united in joy. It's the campfire, it's the dance, it's the party. And that's, all youth seeks out the party, we all did when we were kids. The parents are away, it's like, come on, let's have a party. But I think the joyousness is the key of life, is experience the joy, just like a surfer has joy riding a wave. Our responsibility in this life is to experience joy. And then, when we pass back over, the only thing we can take with us is the love and the joy we've experienced in this in this moment, or riding this wave.
Andrew, do you think that the spirits you've communicated with, do you feel that they can see the future, or are they totally in the present, or whatever?
They are very much in the present. When I have channeled spirit myself, or when I have experienced spirit, the unifying experience has been messages of love, or guidance for what is happening at the moment. And, especially because all of this began for me before the internet. So I went, I seeked out a lot of mediums and psychics because I wanted to talk to them about their experiences. And I don't think it's really possible to tell the future. I think on all of the readings I've had, all of them, the psychics I've spoken to, I would say 30% maybe have some kind of accuracy in prediction. I think what people are able to do is read the energy that is around you, your wishes, your desires, your feelings, the direction you're going with things. I think it's weird because destiny seems to exist, and yet the future seems to be impenetrable. God, I can't say the word. But yet, in my dreams, I have seen the future. So I don't know. I'm truly mystified by it.
Yeah. Did I ask you I did ask you if you'd gone to Casadega, right?
Yes. No, and I haven't.
Okay, you need to.
Okay.
I think you would fit right in.
So villages, mediums, basically. And some of them are good, some of them maybe not so.
Yeah. But it is an interesting place.
Yeah. So I was wondering, Andrew, has your photography applied to your investigation of spirit at all?
No, not at all. And Trish, you did send me the work of that lady who had tried to take photography into it. I had an in question of spirit. I had one experience which was fascinating. Again, I wrote about it in the book, and I interviewed the girl whose name's Carolyn Park, who's perhaps the most psychic person I've ever met in my life. But she was a fashion model, and I was doing a fashion story for actually Elle magazine. And she came into the house here and she said, oh, no, wait, let me just jump back. About 3 months before this happened, a friend of mine who knows my interest had said there was a very powerful psychic visiting from England. So I invited him over. We had lunch here on the balcony. And after lunch, he said, look, I'll do the cards for you. And he read my cards. Interestingly, not tarot cards, a plain deck of the 50 cards, and he laid the cards out and he said a few things, and one of the things, he just stopped and he looked up at me and he said, you're going to photograph the spirits, but you're going to think your equipment is broken, but it's not. You're seeing spirit. And I remember, I put it in the back of my mind and I was like, oh, okay, fine. Anyhow, 3 months later, I'm doing this shoot with English Elle, and the fashion editor, who was she herself, she's now actually working as a healer. She left fashion and is now a healer. She said to me, you're going to really enjoy this girl. She's got a lot of psychic ability. So we did the shoot at my house here in LA. Carolyn Park walked in the house, and the first thing she said was like, there's spirits here. And I said, don't worry, it's John. He's a friend. I know who he is. She proceeded to have a 2-day conversation with this spirit, John, who's had a big influence in my life. And as we were doing the photographs, this was in the days before digital, when you would do Polaroids to check the exposure and to check everything before you shot the film. And all across the Polaroids were these streaks of light that I'd never seen before or since. And it's kind of a mystery to me, because it's, I know the equipment and I know everything. But of course, when this started happening, Caroline's talking literally to John as if he's in the room. And then I'm remembering what this psychic had said 3 months earlier. And, and so I did put one of the Polaroids in the book.
Yeah, that's that's an incredible photo.
Yeah, the problem with the psychic photography is that I guess it can be fake so much. Like in this book that Trish sent you, or she has a lot of photographs, but she blatantly says, she created them, that they're not spirit contacts. They're just kind of.
Andrew, did I send you the picture of the spirit dog?
No.
Okay, after the show, I'm going to send it to you. It's from a friend of ours who lost her dog, and that evening, her security camera captured this spirit of the dog. I mean, it really looks like a dog hovering above the dog's favorite spot to sit on the couch.
Yeah, it's pretty impressive.
I'll send it to you. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I've had so many experiences with spirit, but it's hard to know, like, visually. I've been more claircognizant and clairaudient. I've actually seen with my eyes nothing. I mean, a couple of times I've had images in my mind, but it's the way that I've experienced spirit is really claircognizance and clairaudience. That's been the strongest impressions I've had, curiously. And I've always thought that even trying to photograph it, even if you could, it would look faked. Because what are you going to see? Smudgy light. I mean, essentially, it's energy that's there, but on a different dimension. And I mean, I had one of the perhaps best spirit stories that I have. One of the interviews I did in Question of Spirit was a medium here in Los Angeles called Hollister Rand. I don't know if you've come across her by name, but she's published a lot of books and she's very known, at least here in LA. And she after I interviewed her, she said, you should come to my psychic development workshop. And so I was like, okay, fine. And I did the 2-day course, and then I did the 3-day advanced course. And one of the things I took away from that was it was mostly women. I was the only guy there. So it's very connected. I feel all of this is very connected with the feminine side or female intuition. Well, of course, I spent my mom was a fashion designer. I've spent my life working in fashion. So I'm obviously, very attuned to the feminine side of things. But anyhow, on the 5th day of doing all of this development course, I was sitting in front of a woman who, we would do how she was doing the work was we would read each other. So you would pair up, she'd give you exercises. And I'm sitting in front of that woman, and in my mind's eye, I see this supermodel looking figure dressed in a business suit with her hair flowing in a sports stadium with all these flags flying. And I'm like, what the hell am I seeing? I can't possibly tell this woman. It seems so irrational. And at that moment, Hollis Naran walked up to me and she said, Andrew, you can see the woman in the sports stadium. Tell her. And I was like,
God.
And I did. And it was this woman's grandmother. She was
Wow.
grandmother had been the first manager of an American female manager of an American football team. And she came through with a message of love and clarity for this woman. But the image was so strong and it seemed so unrelated to the woman I was looking at. I was afraid to tell her what I was seeing.
Had you communicated anything of that to Hollister before that, or she just picked up on what you were seeing?
She just kept literally in the classroom. She just walked over and she just said that. So there was no way at all that there was no way for this to be anything other than we were seeing the same thing in our mind's eye.
Right. It's fascinating.
Is she still practicing in LA?
But yes, because I still get newsletters from her.
Yeah.
Her last name is Rand, R-A-N-D.
R-A-N-D, Hollister Rand.
Yeah.
Pretty cool.
And I really enjoyed her psychic development workshop. Was actually a really great 5 days experience. It was really, to walk away with what I would call something so proof positive.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, she did say some things like, just because people have passed over doesn't mean that they're good. They take the good and the bad. You always have to protect yourself and make sure that, what you're dealing with is of the good.
Yeah.
But
pretty cool.
Yeah, you have a story in your book about a child who's 2.5 years old remembering a past life. I was fascinated by that because it was like she went into a trance, this little kid. I think they're in a car. And
yes.
And it seemed like she was almost possessed by like a former self. And can you talk a little bit about that? That was really interesting.
Yeah, that was a fascinating story. And that, that was a connection sort of through a friend of a friend. And weirdly enough, the child didn't remember it, and as an adult still doesn't remember it, but the two parents in the car heard all of this, and it was literally like your child in the back seat is kind of going into a trance. They were talking about a family illness. I forget the illness, but it was some kind of a liver thing, if I remember correctly. But it's a family illness that had gone through several generations. And the child literally kind of went into this trance and said, I'm not going to get this. I passed of that in my last life. And then she went into this whole thing of her last life in a village in the south of, I think it was the south of India. It was in India. And remembered her whole life, her the village, her parents, her siblings, and she basically described her whole past life. And then, kind of suddenly, snapped out of it. The father was so freaked out that he didn't know that he was going faster and faster in the car. And then he got pulled over for speeding. And when the cop car came up behind them, it snapped the daughter out of it. And she didn't even remember what she'd said.
Wow.
Yeah,
How has synchronicity played into your whole thing, investigation of this
Oh
spirit?
my gosh, massively. And fun enough, it was your talk on synchronicity that I listened to over Christmas that got me to just go, you know what, I'm just going to email you. Synchronicity has been, and that's something that comes in waves. There are times when you notice everything kind of aligns, and then there's times when it sort of de-scrambles, if you will. Synchronicity seems to be sort of the evidence that everything that you are aligned with what you're meant to be doing. When it falls out of alignment, then I think it's time to recalibrate yourself. But I don't understand it, but as a witness of it, it's been an incredibly powerful thing in my life. And I mean, honestly, with synchronicity, I think is luck. And I feel like my life has been defined by luck. I could not claim to have had the journey I've had or gotten where I've gotten through anything other than luck. And that luck and that synchronicity seem to be very much, harmonized.
So in a sense, it was the voice of your destiny. Do you think?
I think so. Yeah, I mean, it's it's the whole discussion of destiny is such a hard one, because has all of this already been written? Has it already happened? Are we experiencing something that has already been? Are we, as souls, as spirits, are we entering into a script that's already been written, events that have already happened, and this is our experience of them? Or is this truly a mysterious unfolding of something that has never happened before? And that's where I honestly, you can argue for both.
It
but
could be
I don't.
It could be it could be a combination of both, really. That you come in with a certain destiny, but you have free will to change things. You have a certain pattern in your life that you're entering. That's one way of looking at it.
I if you're pro the argument for destiny, you don't have the ability to change anything. You're going to experience what destiny has written. The only thing you can do is alter your attitude to what is
I don't like the word destiny because it implies something fixed.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And but then if it may, but we can't argue it either way.
You're right, I know.
Because essentially all of this is a firework. It's a holographic firework. So maybe it is all written.
Yeah, that's why we need to have Jude back to sit for about 5 hours and teach us all.
I know. I have to say, I was really blown away by what I was, I really would love to talk to her more about the things that she's really getting to something that I think is really key. And it's funny because she talked about the word or the wave, and I've thought a lot about sound and music. When you think of the energy in every atom, I mean, one of the best conversations I had in Question of Spirit was with a pair of scientists, Maria, who led the team that won the Nobel Prize for proving the Higgs boson exists at the Large Hadron Collider, and her fiance, Eric, who's the world's leading expert in quantum teleportation. That conversation blew my mind. The first thing I said, so what's can you explain the nature of this reality? And he said, well, what was here before the Big Bang and what's the universe expanding into? And the first thing they said is, you've asked the two questions in science you can't ask. And they then proceeded to tear science to shreds, saying it's a dogma. Science is like a religion. It's a dogmatic belief. The truth is always changing. Knowledge is always changing. And what and I mean, there's that cliche of science progresses one funeral at a time, but it does, because the people who come up with an idea get fixed on that idea, and then nothing changes until after they've gone. But it was fascinating to hear their take on the limits of science and the dogmas of science. But, you know, I said, so what's an atom look like if you make it the size of a football stadium? And essentially, it's not there. There's nothing there. It's charged. It's just charged fields. There aren't little golf balls whizzing around like we were shown at school, which again,
Right.
Jude had talked about exactly that. All of this is it's energy. Where does this energy come from? So is it a frequency? Is it a vibration? So I know there's one of the things I've listened to a lot is the UFO stuff that is in the field of the mystical underground. I've 3 times seen craft, and I've had one dream where I was shown and taken in a craft, and when it was a dream, but when I woke up from it, I saw myself coming back down into my body. So it was an extraordinary dream where it could have been real, but I was taken inside the craft I saw, and all 3 times I've seen the craft, it was a round metal. They've been round metal spheres, just look like a giant ball bearing in the sky.
How do you know you weren't up there? How do you know you weren't? Yeah.
I mean, I kind of don't, but yet, was it a dream or was it? It's really hard to tell. I feel like it was a dream, but it could have been real, but I don't know. But it was, I can describe the inside of the craft incredibly clearly. It was on 3 levels. The middle level was all white, and it was essentially the living space. The upper level was obviously a dome, and there was only 1 chair. It was a 1-person craft. And when I entered the dream, I was standing at the back of the room with a hand on my shoulder, and the person who I was with said, don't look at me, don't turn around, I'm going to show you the craft that you saw. And I'm standing in the room, and he said, and the voice, which was, I don't remember if it was male or female, but it was a soft voice, said, this is the living space, this is the storage for everything we need for the travel. And so we walked, and it, the craft was about the size of a UPS truck, if you know what I mean. So you're not talking about a big craft. So we walked to the end where there was a staircase, walked up the staircase, which arrived in the middle of the dome, and there was a single chair. So the stairs come up, you walk around, you sit in the chair, put your hands on effectively what looks like 2 iPads. And as soon as you touch the 2 iPads, the entire craft effectively vanishes, because the outside is all micro lenses. The what looks like a steel ball bearing is actually all micro lenses. And when you put your hands on the pads, you see what is outside the craft, because the floor and the dome is all screen. So as soon as you touch the pads, you see where you are and what's outside the craft, and then it moves by thought. And so the character said, what would you like to see? I said, I'd love to see the Andromeda Galaxy. Just like you changed the TV channel, I'm looking at the Andromeda Galaxy from above it. And the Milky Way is a tiny little dot way off in the distance. And when I realized how far away I was, I had a moment of fear. It's like, oh, shit. And then as soon as I had that moment of fear, I saw myself dropping back down into my body, back to Earth. But I was actually, at that time, I was camping in New Zealand. So I saw myself coming back down from the sky to the camper van and enter the camper van. So
it sounds real, Andrew.
It was very real. I can't tell you if it was a dream or not, but it was a very real experience. But what was really interesting to me was the fact that the craft was able to move by thought, which is interesting. And so if this universe is indeed consciousness, if this is as Jude had proposed, then it makes absolute sense that you could move through thought. And the fact that there are so many UFO sightings now, I mean, and it's becoming almost such a normalized thing. And as craft that I had the experience of both seeing and the dream of, these are camper vans. These are not intergalactic traveling ocean liners. These are camper vans. They're designed for short trips. So if you're doing a short trip, you're not doing interstellar space. You're doing interdimensional hops and skips.
Right.
Yeah, but to the Andromeda, I mean, that's got to be far.
It's far. I mean, it's far if you're doing it with a rocket engine.
Right.
It's
Right.
It's before the last ice age, probably even longer.
Yeah, interesting.
That may be how space travel ultimately will take place. Not give up on the attempt to use all these engines to move physically, but through our minds or through our spirits to transfer to different dimensions, different parts of the universe. I
want to ask him a little bit more about this dream. Did you ever see the person? You didn't, right?
No, never did. Because when the voice said, "Don't turn around, don't look at me," I felt like I had to respect it. I felt like I was getting an I don't know, it felt sort of like I felt like in the dream, this was I was being given a gift, and, I wasn't anything to, it was I felt like it was an act of trust, if you will.
Now, when this person sat down and put hands onto the iPads, where were you? Were you behind?
Oh no, I was the one putting the hands on the iPad.
You were? Okay. Wow.
Yeah. He was behind me, or and so with all the time the hand was on my shoulder, my right shoulder, and I was guided up the stairs. And then, the chair was right there. So the stairs came up, if you imagine the dome and the chair is in the middle, the stairs came up diagonally behind the chair. And then, so, he just sort of took me around and said, "Okay, sit in the chair."
Oh, okay.
Hands on the, on the arms. And so on the arms were these sort of screen-like things, like as if two iPads were set in the screen. And then as soon as you touched them, it activated the craft. Oh, he also did explain to me the bottom third of the craft, the bowl, was the motive power unit, and you don't even have to go in there. Whatever it was powering it. It was, it required no maintenance or fuel. It was built into the craft.
Was there any noise that you could hear? Any sounds? Interesting.
That's interesting.
Yeah, that is.
So it sounds like it was a lucid dream that you really felt
at the very minimum.
that you were there. You also have a chapter about extraterrestrial life in the later part of your book, and where you ask the mediums. You have I don't know, 5 or 6, 7 mediums that you were interviewed, and what surprised me is they all answered, but they all, I think most, maybe I didn't catch all of them, that they seem to never have had an experience themselves, which I found surprising.
I did too, to be honest. But, just based on especially, based on what we now kind of know, that if this is all consciousness, life and the existence of the universe seem to be incredibly harmonized, which again was why Jude's interview is so interesting, because I think life probably, it's almost impossible it doesn't exist everywhere, but conscious life, to get to the point where we've got, I mean, think how long the dinosaurs were here, how long it took life to evolve to this level of consciousness. So life seems to be an essential part of creation. To think we're the only place where life exists is it's almost more absurd than just thinking life and creation are completely aligned.
Well, did this being or this person or whatever ever explain to you what he or she was doing here? Nothing. Okay. Interesting.
No, I mean, in that dream, I was being shown the craft that I had, and the craft I saw. I mean, the first time I saw a craft, I was in an aeroplane taking off. I was coming back from a job in I've been working randomly in New Orleans about 3 weeks before Hurricane Katrina. And
interesting.
Totally randomly, I was there photographing Matthew McConaughey, and as the plane was taking off, flying out of coming out, we were probably about 30,000 feet, but we were in what I call layer clouds. You know, whether you're going through one layer and another and another, and you can see all these layers. And I was looking out the window, looking down at Louisiana, and then I saw this round craft pass by in a gap in the clouds below us. I only had my eyes on it for maybe 2 seconds, long enough to see it and be like, what the hell is that? And it was maybe, my dad was a pilot, and I spent a lot of time in my childhood in light airplanes. So I feel like I'm very good at aircraft recognition and knowing what things are. And it was definitely not any kind of a balloon. It was a round craft, and it was going under its known speed. But I didn't, it's like, oh, that's just weird. But it was so quick that it's like, you kind of didn't quite believe it. But the second time I saw the craft, it was in Los Angeles on the hillside with 180-degree clear, open sky, blue sky, not a cloud in the sky, perfect afternoon sunlight. And at first, it was actually, I was with my ex, and she saw it first, and we're like, what is that? Is it a helicopter? Because when a helicopter's coming at you, it looks round, but you see the rotor blades up above. And so we were looking at it like, where are the rotor blades? And by the time it was close enough that we realized what it was, I knew there wasn't time to run inside and get a camera and try and photograph it, because it was going too quick. But so we stood and watched it fly by, effectively down Sunset Boulevard, going out to the west. And both of us were like so sure that it would be in the press the next morning. It would be all over the newspaper. UFO flies down Sunset Boulevard. Scoured the internet, scoured the news. Somehow we were the only 2 people who saw this thing. And which is really, really confusing. How can you live in a city of 8 million people, in the middle of 4 airports with all the radar that they have, between LAX, Santa Monica, Van Nuys, and Burbank? This thing just flew straight down Sunset Boulevard.
Wow.
At kind of the height and at the speed that you would expect a police helicopter to fly. So, 1,500 feet, doing about 150 knots, and clear, I mean, just completely clear, and about the, as I said, the size of a UPS truck. But if you made a UPS truck into a metal sphere, and it was so, just completely clear. And at that point, I was like, okay, they're here. This is it. There's no denying it. And it was really good to see it with someone else, because then that's real. Yeah, that's really real.
I'm not cuckoo.
Exactly. This is not hallucination. This is for real. There it is.
The fact the fact that you saw this, your partner saw this, and nobody else reported it reminds me of an experience that Trish and I had a couple years ago. We went to Barnes and Noble in our
just thinking of that
neighborhood. So we went inside, and I was in the metaphysical section, and I saw a UFO book that I'd never seen before. So I picked it up and bought that book, and we went outside in the parking lot, and there was this something above us, maybe 500 feet, 700 feet, but it was just like a light. I couldn't see anything but the light. And we stood there staring at it. It was right above the parking lot. And all these people were walking by. Nobody looked up, nobody stopped and said, what is that? And so we just,
it's just us.
Just looking at it. And so after Trish finally said, well, I want to go over to Walgreens. So we got in the car. And so we drove to Walgreens, which is very close by. And Trish went in, I stayed in the parking lot, and I looked, and there that thing is, whatever it is, had moved over through these trees, and because I could no longer, I thought, well, I'm not going to see it anymore because we're located, but no, it had moved over and there it was again.
And there was never any report of it in the news, nothing.
Right. And it had no sound. We never saw it move at all.
I mean, that's the thing is that, I mean, there is, again, the mystery is greater than the known. But,
Yeah.
you know, I mean, it's the same. I don't understand how nobody saw the one that we saw. But then that dream I had came about 6 weeks after the event, after seeing it. So in terms of time, it was pretty close. It was either like 6 to 8 weeks later.
Now, okay, the craft in your dream, was it like the craft you saw?
Yeah, it was the person or the entity showing me the craft said, this is the craft you saw.
Oh, all right. Interesting.
So I think, I mean, whether it was, he meant the same kind of craft or the actual
craft. Yeah.
Yeah, but I think it was the actual craft.
There's hope, Rob.
Yeah, right.
Somebody will say, okay, we're taking you up.
Then there's the whole question of the connection between these extraterrestrial interdimensional beings and spirits. Whitley Strieber writes about seeing somebody who is deceased with an alien being or whatever they are, you want to call them. He calls them visitors. And, you know, you can look at it two ways, that actually there's an interchange, or that they can move into the same afterlife realm, or that they're showing you that person that you knew to make you feel more comfortable that, you know, that's somebody, you know. So, you know, you can look at it either way, whether it's a projection or it's actually, you know,
I think part of his theory is that they do inhabit the same realm. Yeah. You know, they're not in separate dimensions.
Which would make sense, because if
it would,
you know, if all of this is an act of creation and it's all basically a web of energy, you know, it would make sense that these beings and spirit are, I mean, you know, that what I call that dream is the only experience I've had with a different entity. All the others have been spirit. And so definitely spirit exists beyond this physical reality. I mean, to me, there's absolutely no question of that.
Have you ever asked John about this?
The John that was with?
Yeah.
No, I mean, he hasn't been around for a long time. He very much was, I mean, he was kind of like a guardian angel to me for maybe 10 years. But then someone who I, you know, who I was then working with said, you know, he needs to go. It's his time to move on. So I did a ceremony to send him on. And he did, rather sadly, he took his own life in real life because he had manic depression. He was suffering bipolar disorder. And you know, it's almost like he gifted me with the things he had wanted to experience in his own life, if you will. And
so when they move on, where do they move on to?
Again,
back into another life? Or
I mean, there are kind of, it feels like there are almost like the containment of this reality has wrappings, if you like, and the next layer from this reality is that reality of the spirits. But then beyond that are more realities that we can't access from here, and they can't come through. If that makes sense. This is, again, this is not knowledge. This is just my sense of it. But you know,
you also ask that question to the mediums too. Where do they go? What is it like? Yeah. And what was their general view of the?
Nothing that I remember.
But I think what I remember is that they were so different. They had very you know, wide-ranging ideas of what they would experience.
You know, it's fun. I mean, it's funny because I actually haven't read the book in years. But, you know, I wrote it maybe 5 years ago. So, oh no more. But
2015.
2015?
Yeah.
So yeah, 8 years ago. And so weirdly enough, in my world of photography, where you're always taking pictures, one of the techniques I have for editing pictures is saying memory is the best editor. The picture you remember when you look at the picture, you know, the film, the ones you remember the day after are the good ones because they stay in your memory. So the takeaway from Question of Spirit, the things I really remember are the childhood stories of a lot of the mediums. But there's one medium, and I don't know his real name because he was working by pure luck. Again, this is synchronicity. I met the guy who is the accountant, the CFO for this big enterprise called California Psychics, I think it is.
Yeah.
It's one of the 800-pound gorillas that, you know, it's a phone-in psychic service. And I was talking to him, you know, I met him at a dinner and I started talking to him about the whole psychic thing and said, oh my God, I'd love to, you know, I'm doing this book. I'd love to interview some of your mediums. And he hooked me up with several of their best mediums to interview, but they all had to be done on pseudonyms. But this guy, he had been from England too. He had been a postman in England, and he became fascinated with music and with John Denver. And he had this whole thing of the key of life. You live your life in a key of life, the songs you like, the music you like, life. It's like again, it's harmonics and music. And that's one of the other really big takeaways. He's someone I would love to reconnect with and hear where he's gone with, you know, with his studies and his work, because I think what he was onto was really something powerful, which is, you know, the harmonics, the key of life, and how music is itself such a channel. I mean, we know the church tried to control music for 2,000 years, essentially.
Right. Is that the one who
failed?
Is that the one you're speaking of, who also went to this tribe in South America and spent time with the shamans?
Oh no, that was another guy.
Okay,
but he was fascinating too. His stories were amazing.
Yeah, he seemed to, one of the things I took away from that, he says, our influences in the Western world come from all over. They come from the East with yoga, they come from Europe, but with this tribe, it's singular. This is their history. This is their spiritual quest has never been influenced by any outside influences at all. It's just always been them, and he considered their experience to be pure in that sense.
That's like the tribe that lived at the top in that Colombian city where we went.
The Kogi Indians.
The Kogis.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
Oh, what was that?
Yeah, we used to lead adventure tours to South America in the 1980s, and we would take riders, and they would go free of charge, and we took 3 trips up into the upper Amazon, but we also went to the
Lost City.
The lost city of Santa Marta. It's near Santa Marta. I can't remember the name
of the city.
Yeah, it was called the Lost City. It was from Santa Marta, and where the only way to get to this lost city was either had to walk for 5 days or take a helicopter. Well, we were on this trip with I don't know, 8 or 10 people, and so we took 2 helicopters and went up there and spent some time up there with some archaeologists. And one on one of the trips, we did this a couple of times. The storm came up and everybody left, but I got stuck.
Rob got stranded.
I got left behind. Everybody gets back to the hotel, and I'm not there. Nobody said anything. That I
did. I said, "Where were you?"
No, nobody. I mean, the pilot or nobody said that we left somebody behind. So when I get left behind there with an archaeologist or 2, and then the Kogis come out of the woodwork, and I had a very interesting time up there that evening.
Oh wow! What did you experience? Did you learn anything, you know, from them, if you will?
Um, I, I can't recall anything right off the bat. I just remember they had these archaic guns from the 19th century, the rifles that they were carrying, and they, you know, they have a. The men are all weavers, and it's like they're weaving the universe. And they what one of the things I remember is that they said that each morning they have these rituals they go through just to make sure that the sun comes up for another day, and that they called themselves the elder brothers, and they call us in the Western world the younger brothers, the people with the helicopters and the airplanes, and that they were kind of responsible for keeping our existence going.
Oh, bless. And that's fascinating. I've always wanted to do the ancient temples of South America, but you know, seeing the pictures, some of the you know, the stonework looks, and even in Machu Picchu, looks amazing. It looks like there's stonework from a much earlier era. And I guess, I mean, I'm sure everyone who's listening and all of us are fascinated by, you know, Graham Hancock and Randall Carlson and all of these, you know, these ideas that perhaps there really was a civilization before. And the very fact we've been the creature we are, with the ability to reason and think and communicate for what 300,000 years they now think, that, you know, the idea that our everything began 6,000 years ago, you know, now Goblet Techie, you know, 12,000 years ago, but it seems ridiculous. And so I think we live in an exciting time where perhaps we will start for the first time to see the civilization before. And, you know, for years we've heard psychics and mediums talk about Lemuria and Atlantis, and I've always been a bit like, really? But now more and more it's like, oh yeah, maybe
I want to go there.
Yeah.
Pick me up.
Yeah, I know. But it is kind of fascinating that and I think a lot of the stonework in South America perhaps hints at another time, because from the pictures I've seen, it looks like the foundations of some of the things like Picchu show a completely different foundational structure, and then the stonework on top is a totally different style.
Yeah. What we were taught in school in our times about
is not true.
What Native Americans were primitive beings that you know, lived in you know, teepees, and I never learned anything about these great fortresses and pyramids that exist just to the south of us. It's right. You know, it's another you know, they were here a long time ago, and had an advanced civilization, and the Mayans, you know, had advanced mathematics, astronomy that you know, is hard to explain.
And I mean, you know, I mean, and you know, from Egypt and the Mayans all over the world, and in Indonesia, we see evidence of massive stretches of time in observing the stars. They knew about the precession of the stars, that you know, whether they necessarily knew that the Earth axis was wobbling on its axis, or whether they thought the heavens was wobbling, I don't know, but they had observed what we call the precession of the stars, which is 22,000 years. I think it's a huge time chunk. So, you know, they already had a massive observational history. And, you know, we all know the story of Noah. Well, I grew up, you know, on the south coast of England, and in a very shipbuilding, sailing area. You can't build an ark without an extraordinary amount of shipbuilding knowledge. So the ancients, I mean, to me, the greatest clue we have of the nature of the ancients is they were navigators. They were sea people, because the only way you have a legend of an ark is you know how to build boats really well. To build a big boat, you have to know how to build boats really, really well.
Yeah, and there's probably, you know, influences from maybe other worlds and or the spirit domain in learning all of these studies in history, their history.
So how do we tap into that?
This is this is something that I have been really intrigued with, because we get glimpses in dreams, in foresight, in deja vu, but we get glimpses that all of this, I mean, I do feel like, I mean, people, you talk about the Akashic records. When I was younger, there was that book, Many Masters, Many Lives. And when I first came to LA in the late 80s, I got really interested in past life regressions. And I did 40 of them. And, because of the dreams, I've always kept dream journals of everything. And after getting to about 40 past life regressions, a penny dropped, and I went, these are not lives I have lived. These are lives that have been lived, and I'm able to access all of this information through hypnosis. When you quiet the conscious mind, through the subconscious mind, you can connect to what Jung would call the collective subconscious, or the Akashic records. So all knowledge is there for us, but we just don't necessarily know how to access it. And I've tried, with meditation and with everything, mushrooms and you name it. It's really hard to access it. Hypnosis seems to be a good way, but it's a good way to get things you need to learn. I would say that my experience with past life regressions, you get told the story you need for what you need to know at that time. And so is it internal, or are you connecting externally, or is the internal pulling from the external what you need to know in this moment? Kind of feels like that. But again, I don't know. The mystery is greater than the known.
Some years ago, there was a book by a healer. He was a chiropractor, Eric Pearl. And he had developed a new healing technique, which didn't involve touching anybody. It was hand motions. So a friend and I went to one of his workshops in Alabama. And what he had you do was work on somebody you didn't know, a stranger, doing these particular hand motions. So I was laying on the table, and the woman, the stranger, started doing these hand motions. And all of a sudden, the top of my skull blew off. Literally, it felt like it. And a light shot out of the top of my skull, went through the ceiling, and suddenly at the top, I saw 3 alien beings peering down. I thought, uh-oh, who are you? And they were friendly. They were just curious. And about 4 years later, during Hurricane Francis, Rob and our daughter were all asleep. The animals were all asleep. I was laying in bed listening to the wind and thinking that the skylights were going to blow off. And all of a sudden, the same thing happened. And I saw them. I thought, okay, I'm okay. And I fell asleep. When I woke up, the hurricane was gone. So I don't know, I've asked, okay, where are you guys? Make another appearance, whoever you are. It was weird.
I mean, it's funny, that reminds me of one of the craziest moments of my life happened. Before I left England and emigrated to America, so we're talking like the mid-late 80s, I was looking after someone's dogs in England, and I had this one dog whose name randomly was Merlin. Merlin used to love to catch the ball, and so I had those bright green tennis balls that you throw for the dogs, and this was I didn't have a throwing stick. I was just throwing it by hand, and it was kind of a gray London day, just kind of the end of the day, so it's kind of dark. But these bright green tennis balls, they're clear to see. You can always see them. And so I threw it for Merlin, and it bounced on the ground. It bounced up in the air. And in front of my eyes, it just vanished into thin air.
Oh, God.
And I was looking at it, rubbing my eyes and saying, it's fine. Merlin's going to find it. Merlin's going to find it. And Merlin's running around looking for the ball. And I'm like, how the hell did that happen? And I'm staring into the space where my ball had vanished. And suddenly it reappears coming back towards me.
Oh, wow.
it just popped back into vision, and it came back and it bounced and rolled up to me, and Merlin ran back and grabbed it at my feet. I was like, how the hell did that happen?
Wow.
Yeah, it's like there's certain times when the dimensions collide or something.
Yeah,
It's
Yeah.
that's fascinating.
but, you
Well,
know,
Andrew, this has been fascinating.
Oh,
We've
it's been
come to
great. We're
end
gonna
of our-
we're gonna get you and Jude on at the
oh
same
my
time.
God, I would love that. That would
that
be
would-
such a good conversation.
That really would.
That would be interesting, right? Yeah. The hour went so fast. Amazing.
Oh, it really did.
It was great talking to you.
And great. I love what you guys are doing. It's great. It's really, it's nice, because I do feel, you know, we all feel, I think, maybe a little alone or separated, you know, so it's
Right.
really nice being able to hear what you're doing. It's well appreciated. Thank you.
Yeah.
But I'll tell people how they can get in touch with you, where your book is, all that.
The book's on Amazon, A Question of Spirit. I think it may even be free on Kindle if
Okay.
Kindle files. I never got round to doing an audio book because you know, it's too many voices, because it's all interviews.
Yeah.
And other than that, I mean, you know, on Instagram, Andrew Macpherson official, or, you know, on the mcfly.com is the work site, and andrewmacpherson.com is the you know, the pictures I love to take.
Okay.
Or the
So,
personal stuff.
so you're still active as a photographer then?
Yes, although I'm actually now working with a medical group who are bringing all these amazing products to market. So I'm working with them kind of as a creative director. Photography is the most beautiful thing, and I feel so gifted to have been able to do it as my life work. But now, over 60, you get aged out. I mean, it's just, you know, it's the media, it's a young person's business. You know, I mean, I got to do what I love for 45 years,
Right.
which is amazing. But
if you ever come to Casadega, please contact us. We will meet you there and do photography. You know, it'd be great. It's a great place to take pictures.
I will, you know, I will. I mean, you know, I have friends in Florida, so I'm sure I will have reason to get there. And I know next year I want to go to, I think it's not as far as Florida. I think it's more in the Nashville area, but there's the eclipse of the sun next year.
Right, the solar eclipse.
Yeah. So I want to go out go east for that. But if I get to Florida, is that where you guys are based?
Yeah, we're in South Florida, near West Palm.
Okay.
Yeah.
Perfect.
That would be great.
Ooh.
Okay,
Thank you
great
so much.
This has been so much fun.
You.
Thanks so much.
Yeah.
This has just been great. Okay, John, when does this go up?
It should be next Sunday, a week from today. Yeah.
And we'll send you the link.
Yeah.
Okay,
And,
great.
Just real quick, I wanted to the conversation was flowing so well, I didn't want to interrupt you guys earlier, but music kept coming up, and it in relation to physics, it reminded me of a favorite quote of mine by Michio Kaku. The universe is a symphony of strings, and the mind of God that Einstein eloquently wrote about for 30 years would be cosmic music resonating through 11-dimensional hyperspace.
Wow.
So there's the music. I mean, we're literally made out of music. So yeah.
That's great. Michio Kaku's good.
Yeah.
His books are terrific.
Yeah. Okay.
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 Thank you,
Okay.
Andrew.
All right. Take care. Have a
you.
beautiful
Okay,
Sunday.
You too.
Bye now.
Take